Here is part 2 of Jamais Vu.
Oh, I saw a comic about that where what is it, like XYZ or whatever?
XYKCD?
Yeah,
Yeah, whatever it is.
where someone was like, "Oh yeah, I got a new Casper mattress and it works well." Oh, really? That's cool. And then like went into and to hear more about it, go to www. And like plugged his podcast and he's like, "I can't help it. Like anytime I talk about mattresses, I have to also talk about podcasts." And which is really interesting, but the association within the brain in and of itself is so interesting, and how it has separate concepts for the word and how it's written and all of that as the concept of and then the actual meaning behind it is it must be separate in the brain if the two things can be disassociated that way.
I think they start out separate, but then they get more connected over time. And then I think that's kind of like habits. I think that's how like habits work in general. Like I think we built a habit of recognizing words, and it's like there's a like a line in neurology which is neurons that fire together wire together. So this has been done so much that essentially these things were two separate things to begin with, but now they're kind of like one automated process.
So
But
classical conditioning.
essentially, yeah.
If your mind naturally wants to associate things when they happen together as being together.
Yeah, and then you start linking the sensation or the perception of that thing to the underlying concept. And this perception of that thing also extends the context of that thing. It's like there's a lot of words out there which have double meanings. Like, bad example, but bitch. Like, you read the word bitch in some context where someone's calling someone a bitch. Let's say it's to a man. You know, that has a certain kind of meaning. It brings up a whole nother concept in if it's to like a woman, or if someone's talking about dogs. Like there's three different concepts there, and you don't have to think about them usually, unless you're not familiar with that, in which case you have to think about it a lot. But for me, it's like I came across like a reading, and I don't see the word bitch referred to with dogs too much, but I've seen it enough where I realized like I didn't have to make that association. I just read it as dog. Like I understood. I didn't think, oh man, they're talking about something weird here. Oh, they said the word bitch. It's just kind of just natural.
Well, that's because you're not a dogologist.
A dogologist?
If you were a dogologist, you would hear the word bitch all the time.
That's true. But I haven't heard it that much, but it's a natural association in my brain now. Like I don't have to be a dogologist to have that association. And so many other associations we make, which is a little scary. It's like our brains are crazy good at pairing two things together. There's actually a hypothesis out there, which is that so they find that people who tend to be more intelligent have greater levels of anxiety and stuff like that. And the explanation behind that is that people who are like intelligence is often linked with pattern matching and kind of this linking two things together.
Yep.
And what happens is that these people, they'll just link two things that actually aren't causal, and then things will reinforce that, and then they get stuck with bad patterns. So people who tend to be more intelligent tend to be more anxious.
You know what's wild about anxiety is a lot of times you're pairing together two things that don't have any reason to pair them together. The reasons to pair them together happened in the head to begin with, which is wild. Like I can't really think of any examples, but let's say someone doesn't want to go to the store because for whatever reason they associate it with being yelled at. It's like that never ever happened in your real life, but with anxiety it creates these ideas in your head like what if, like this could happen, and that bond can happen so much that all of a sudden it's paired to the point where now you're like, if I go to the store I will get yelled at.
Yeah. It kind of, it's like there's a sandwich there, like a sandwich between the action or the thing leading up to it, and then the actual like thing you want to avoid. And then what anxiety will do is take like what's the sandwich in between there and just kind of put it right next to each other. It gets rid of the filler.
Yeah, it's wild to me that the brain is so efficient at fucking you over.
Yeah, very efficient, especially in the modern age. Actually, here's one good example, which is not anxiety related, but good example of pairings is So imagine that you eat some great pizza, right? So you eat some pizza, and then there was something, not the pizza, something that made you sick, and you just happen to get sick, and you start throwing up and all this kind of stuff. Maybe it was something you ate like 3 days ago, and it just now is making you sick. Like your body was trying to process it, but your brain is going to see what made you sick as being the pizza, not the thing that actually made you sick, because it's essentially just saying, I ate this pizza, I got sick, therefore it must be the pizza. And there's certain things where if you get super sick from that, your brain will like associate just those two things together, and you can't unassociate that. Like there's been a few things I've gotten sick with, and I can't eat that thing anymore. Like
Vodka. Not a big fan of vodka.
Because he puked.
Because too many times have I been way too drunk on vodka.
And your brain just associates that naturally. You didn't have to think, oh God, is this kind of like, ugh.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know with alcohol, like if you drink too much, no matter what, that's going to be the effect. But it has such a standoff to it in general that it immediately associates it with it to the point where even tasting it, I feel like I'm going to get sick.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And it's kind of weird how like the brain will prime you for those emotions you're gonna feel, like even before the things actually happen. Like you feel sick even before you're sick.
It's definitely fascinating to think that your brain's constantly doing stuff like that too, and constantly preempting things that may or may not happen. You've probably already thought out all of the aspects of how it could happen.
It's something like I don't think people get enough recognition for how much thinking they do. Like there's a lot of basic people out there. I'm gonna call them basic because they don't seem like they have too much depth and too much like knowledge and stuff. But it's like you start talking to them and you start really kind of like delving into their thinking, and they've already done all the thinking for like they've already done all the thinking, and they've just come to these kind of different paths and scenarios. Like they already kind of set in stone, and it's not that they don't think, it's that they've already thought. Like they've already thought about the possibilities and how to handle those possibilities. I mean, not in all the cases, but it's like people think that people are dumb, but they're not dumb. It's just that they've already weighed out all the complex options, and maybe they're making up some answer in the forefront. So it's like, okay, this is gonna get too a little controversial here, but there's a lot of people who stay into religious communities, and people think they might be smarter, like too smart for, say, Christianity or for whatever religion they're in, and that they should not be doing it. And you might talk to them about it, and you might think they're stupid because you're responding to them with, like, say, logical arguments or arguments against it, and they don't have good responses. But the thing is, they're not stupid. They've already done all the calculations in their head, and maybe it's not relating exactly to Christianity or the thing at hand, but they're doing all the social calculations. They've already done that. They already know that if they were to lead their religion, they might have a huge issue with their family, huge issue with their friends. They already have this established base, this community they're in. There's all these different aspects to that, and these persons already thought about that, all the calculations and stuff, and maybe they're just kind of giving these non-answers, like kind of unconsciously about whether to do it. But you talk to people about these kind of things and actually like get in depth into it. There's a lot of like logic and stuff that goes on to it, and it may not pertain to exactly what you're talking about, which is why these conversations never go very well, because it always gets sidetracked into different things. But it's kind of there. Like people, I think, are far further than people give credit for.
I feel like it's very limiting to think so in depth about a lot of things like that, though. And though I'm cursed with overthinking myself, as I'm sure most people feel they are, I think that to be able to not consider all of the options and instead just let whatever happens happen and react in that moment, that's a much less limiting way, because if you've already thought about all the things and then either A, something happens that you were expecting, so you have this pre-made answer that maybe isn't the right call because you've thought about all these other things, or something happens that you weren't expecting and now you're completely panicked. Like both of those are negative outcomes to having already tried to think about what may or may not be the outcome when there's an infinite amount of possibilities. I
mean, that's rebuttal to that, but the idea that people don't have some sort of logic or they haven't thought about that's what I'm challenging. And there's definitely limitations to that, but there's also benefits, because it's like I myself, like one issue I have is you might ask me a basic question and I have to process that. Like I'm not very good on my feet. I can be in certain circumstances, but in many circumstances, like I can't like actually like think as I go. Like I have to extend out the thinking. I have to turn it into a conversation. It's a big issue I have with confrontation because if, let's say, this happens sometimes. So let's say my boss comes to me and he talks to me about some sort of problem and he starts addressing the problem with myself. I haven't thought about that at all. And for me to start talking about it then, like, I know I'm either going to start making everything up. Like, I don't know what I think about this issue. I don't know whether that's a actual problem. Like, and I'll start thinking after the fact. And so for me, I'm a very kind of reactionary thinker, or I have to be proactive if it's a circumstance that I'd find myself coming into. But some people, they just come up with stuff on the fly. Like, they're very good about thinking on the fly like that. Like, if you come to me about some issue that you have with me, like, I'll ask a bunch of questions, but I don't know how to respond to that. I don't know if it's true. I don't know whether those accusations are, like, right or wrong, unless I've already done thinking on it.
I think that a lot of times if you, like, let's say you ask somebody about a thing and, like, you're saying that it's, they've clearly already thought it out because they can give you all this rationale of why. I think a lot of times people are thinking about things, like, in subconsciously, and when they are finally articulate it, they are even realizing, wow, I really have actually thought this out. But in reality, they haven't. It's kind of just like they're recalling subconscious stuff that they weren't actively thinking about. Like, it's less that they're thinking about this thing and really coming to a rational conclusion, and more that in the moment they're thinking about it and coming to a rational conclusion.
Yeah, that's me a lot. I'm very aware of my subconscious processes. Like, I kind of know what my brain's thinking about a lot of times. And a lot of times I have, like, these semi-thoughts that they're not realized fully into my conscious brain. Like, I can't actually vocalize them, but I know they're there. Like, an instance is from the other day. I was talking to somebody about something with Kotlin. So Kotlin's like a programming language and Android, and how I don't know where I came up with this. I know where I came up with it, but I put forward the idea that I think Google is going to go on to the next thing. So they're going to move on from Android, and they already have, like, the next project released. And I think they're going to do something with Kotlin, which is a new kind of language out there. Right now they're using Java, and they're essentially going to launch something which will be compatible with iOS and Android. It's going to make some sort of program, some sort of tool where that's really easy to do, because that would give them a lot of traction and so on. So I have many reasons for that. Not something I really thought about consciously before, but as I was saying it and getting in that thought, it felt to me like a thought that's just kind of happened out of the aether. But I kind of remembered all the little times and all the little formations that led up to that thought. Like, I had been thinking about this for a little while now, but it's just now that I'm vocalizing that thought and kind of, like, understand it's being brought to the surface.
So it's kind of like Jamais Vu in a way, that it feels like a new concept, even though you know that you've been thinking about it for so long.
Whoa, geez, that's kind of meta. Oh,
Yeah,
shit.
I know. I just Jamais Vu'd myself, because clearly I've been thinking about how to connect this whole time.
Hold on a second, because that's very interesting. So, yeah, it's something that feels familiar because I know I've been thinking about this, but it feels new as well. My God.
Yeah, I'm good.
Fuck. Okay, well, we just have to end right there. Right?
I mean, I guess.
Can we top that?
So I released an album in 2017 that you actually produced, and I titled it Jamais Vu.
Yeah.
The idea behind that being, it's a rap album. It's not particularly great, but I think it's much better than, let's say, the last rap you heard from me, which was really bad, from back when I rapped on a forum. So I've come a long way. It's not something I do all the time, so it's just one of my, like, background passion projects that I do. But the whole concept behind calling it Jamais Vu was that it takes a lot of the old school styles and changes them into kind of my way of repeating those styles. So it has a lot of Biggie, but it also has a lot of kind of the newer stuff where it's a little bit faster. and it has a lot of depth in lyrics, and that's really where my biggest focus is. So it's something you've heard before, but it's absolutely brand new.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I love the album. I mean, I help produce it, of course, so I have some sort of natural inclination to it. But the songs are legit good. Like some of the rhymes and words in there. Like I think my favorite probably is what's it called? It's the quick one.
Spitfire?
No,
The quick one.
Memories.
Take a bow.
Yeah, that's right. So there's one song. I
You said one word. I'm like, oh, I know that one. Fuck.
So there's one song I really like called "Take a Bow." It's very kind of fast, but it's super like heady, like very intelligent. Like it's the song just kind of elicits something for me, and also Spitfire is really good too. There's you just kind of shrugged.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm super critical. I think it's good for a white boy from Maine, and that's about it.
So I'll be honest. One song that I really like, but I also don't think came out very well is I don't think it was actually on the album. It was the drug one where it's like you go to a party or something and get drugged out.
Yeah, I removed that from the album.
Yeah,
I shrunk the album down significantly. It was like 14 songs, and now it's like 5.
that's that song. It's like when we're recording it, I loved it. It was super like great, but then when I listened back to it, I'm like.
There's a good concept, but it didn't match very well.
Yeah, the lyrics were really good. Stuff was really good with it, but it just didn't naturally pan out.
And that was very Biggie in concept because it was telling a story with artful lyrics, which I always loved about Biggie Smalls. I think Tupac did an amazing job. Like Tupac told the story like nobody else. Biggie had this really natural, like really good flow that I enjoy, but he also has a way of phrasing things. Like at one point he says that he like popped open a briefcase and all he saw was Franklin faces. So he didn't say $100 bills, but you know what he's talking about, and it rhymed with what he was saying, and it flowed so perfectly, and it made you think for a second. Instead of just saying $100 bills, you're showing, not telling. You're showing what he saw was Franklin's face and what that meant to him, which was more than just $100 bills. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I was trying to go for, was to tell a story in an artful way. But I don't think that the delivery was what it needed to be, and probably will never be, because I don't think I have enough dedication to that to push it to where it could be if I wanted it to be.
Yeah, we could actually go like a whole subject about that, because I have a strong history of starting endeavors into things and getting mediocre and not pushing past into like the like being really good. Like I've done animation stuff. Like I think I got pretty decent with animation. Like I produced some pretty good stuff, like for what I was, for who I was. But I couldn't put in the extra time to take it to like greatness or like a professional level. Like I was a good amateur or decent amateur, but not like a great amateur.
I think you and I are alike in the sense that we both are very, very good at learning and picking things up and then applying that knowledge. And we're very good at, if we want to make something happen, we can make it happen. But I think that we're also very fragmented in our desires and what we want to do. And a lot of things pique our interest. And because of that drive, we follow all of those threads instead of mastering one thing and sticking with one thing. We want to do so many things, and we end up doing so many things that it fragments our time.
Very true. It's like, yeah, that's often what happens. Like I got really into guitar and started getting really good with guitar, or I say pretty decent with guitar. But then my focus became on recording. And then so it took away from guitar, and now, I was playing guitar with that, but now my thing is recording, getting good at mixing, getting good at production, and kind of then composition. And it's kind of like I started working on the things beyond that, but I never got like super great at guitar. I'm decent at guitar, but I'm not like great. Now, if I put the work into guitar, I could get really good at it. But yeah, I just start going off into other areas, or I was doing drawing for a bit, so I got pretty decent with drawing. But then I'm like, oh, okay, animation. This makes sense. Oh, okay, music. Oh, okay, programming. Oh, okay, let's do bass. Oh, okay, let's do this. Now podcasting. So it's like I get decent, but yeah, never great because it's just fragment everywhere.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's great that you can do something and do it good, and then move on to something else that piques your interest and continue to grow in that way. Continue to find things that you like and pursue them and get decent at them. I think it's awesome because at any point you could be out and about and just pick up a guitar and start playing. Like that's a really cool skill to have. You don't need to be you'll probably never be in a situation where you need to play guitar like insanely good. But you'll probably be in a lot of situations where you could pick up a guitar and everybody will think you're insanely good because of the skill you have in comparison to the context in which you're using it.
That's true. That's true.
Like I want to make myself, and I'm aware of this in myself, so I actively do this. I try and find as many things as I can get reasonably good at as possible. So if I'm ever in any situation, I'll be reasonably good at that situation. So if I ever go out to karaoke, I want to be just good enough at singing to not be embarrassing. I don't want to be great at singing because that was going to take a lot of work. But I want to get 40% of the way there and be reasonable.
Yeah. It's pretty easy to make those gains too. I mean, if you're somewhat competent with learning, and we pick up on things fast. So if you're somewhat competent, like getting up to like a C is not too hard. Getting from a C to a B though, that's really tough. And getting from a B to a B plus, very tough.
Yeah. It progressively and exponentially gets harder and harder to improve on those small percentages as they go up towards 100. For sure.
It's especially true with like music and guitar, because it's like I've learned about what these people do to actually get to where they are. Some people are just naturally kind of gifted, like they don't need to practice that much. Like but most people, like how much they practice guitar, it's hours and hours a day. Like there's a regimen out there, which is like the 8-hour guitar workout. And it's a bit, tongue in cheek in a way, but it's also legit because they say if you want to get really good at your instrument, practice like at least 3 hours a day. And then just practice these songs nonstop. And this is why they're so good. This is why they're playing flawlessly and perfectly, and why they're coming up with these great things, and why they have such a deep understanding of what they're playing. But do I want to do that?
I wonder how much of the capacity to learn new things and compare that to the old things you already know actually like overlaps, like your ability to apply said knowledge in the sense that you're learning something new, but it feels like something you already know. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I remember this feeling of starting something new and how hard it is, but I know that in X amount of time, like I'm going to have completely encompassed everything I wanted to learn already.
I wish it was like that. I mean, maybe some people feel like that, but it's like I've done programming before. I've released one of my apps. I'm making another app, and there's things that should be pretty easy, but I'm having a hard time with, and I just like I know that I can get past it. Like this is what I keep telling myself. Like what I'm experiencing is these things aren't familiar, so they seem super convoluted. They seem super convoluted and kind of like pointless. And why am I doing it this way? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? Like this is really confusing. Why did they design it this way? Like I know at the end of this, it's just a familiarity thing. I'm not familiar with these systems, so I have to like learn them. But it's like during that time, it's like fucking God Christ, and then I smash my head against the wall. That's how I feel when I learn new things.
It does explain all the holes in your walls. You're not getting your security deposit back. But it's probably worth it because, like, for that moment, you don't have to think. You just think about how much your head hurts.
Yeah.
I just think that learning in and of itself can be transposed across different mediums. So learning, like, just because, like, you learn guitar and you know that you're going to, you've seen yourself get to X level, and you know that when you're learning a new program, it's going to be the same in a sense. It's going to be the same in the sense that it's going to start off difficult and it's going to get easier and easier, and then it's going to get really, really hard, because then you're going to hit something that's like, is this worth the amount of time it's going to take to put in to get over that hurdle? And sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's no.
Yeah, and I think you have to be very sensitive to when they're learning something new, because you have to get into the right community, or you have to understand what you're getting into. Because if you go to the wrong place, like, you're gonna get really confused. Like with guitar, for instance, like you can get into certain kind of communities where they talk very like they talk like musicians do, like, oh, this is a C major 9 over a blah blah blah, and then you do this, that. Like, they talk about in these like extremely kind of complicated ways, and I've got the vocabulary now to understand what they mean. And what
I
they're
know,
talking
because
about.
when we were talking about music, that's how you talk, and I'm like, I have no fucking clue what you're talking about.
Yep.
I'm like, I hold my fingers like this to make this noise.
But you gotta know like where to go to learn, because if you go to those places, like, you're just gonna be really confused. But if you go to like a better place to learn, like a place which is more friendly to beginners, or maybe a place where they are catering to beginners, then that's makes it a lot easier.
So it's maybe not a better place to learn in the sense that the first place is a bad place to learn, but a better place to learn given your current status and skill set.
Yeah.
So a better place for you specifically to learn what you need to learn at the level you're at.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think I've learned, this is to kind of help your point, is that everything is kind of like learning a new language, and it's identifying the different components of that thing and how to interact with those components. So it's like with guitar, there's the components of like, hitting the like fretting
Claris.
something.
Oh, never mind.
There's
Talking about different things.
components of like, fretting and then hitting the thing and doing these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put those together and you start making music, and you have, tabs, sheet music. And then you kind of go on with theory. So you start laying things on top of that. And what you're learning is partially the technique. So there's like the physical component, the actual technique of it. But you're also just learning the language and how to actually like conceptualize those things in your head. When you learn a new language, like say Spanish or French or whatever, you're learning the sounds and the actual kind of technicalities, like how to say these things or how to write these things. But you're also learning the conceptual thing. So what these things mean, the grammar behind it, how things fit together, the logic of things. And programming, kind of the same thing. You're trying to learn not just the language, but also how the language can be used and structured in these different ways. Like with music, like people don't think about music and like, there's a lot of structure to music. So like one thing with melodies is you have like a question and then an answer. So the question is like, do. So that's the question. Then there's the answer. Do. So that's like the answer to that. So there's a question part and there's an answer, but that's like a higher level concept. But then you start learning that language and you start going on with that. Like, it takes a while to learn it. So I think that's one thing that I realized, like, when I get interested in anything, it's just getting that familiarity and also just learning that thing. Because, like, any expert talks to each other, like, you're in a business context. There's all these, like, words they're using, right? All this lingo stuff. And if you don't know the language yourself, the language they're speaking, then you don't know how to talk to them. You don't know what's going on.
Unless you're really good at conceptualizing, in which case you can take what they're saying and try and draw from the context to figure out what they actually mean. And I think my brain excels in that aspect, that I'm really good at faking it. If people are talking about something that's over my head, I'm able to understand it on a conceptual level to understand what they're actually saying a lot of the time. I mean, obviously that's not across the board, but I'm good at least looking like I know what I'm talking about, even when I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not very good at looking like I know what I'm talking about. I mean, I kind of am, but it's like the strategy I've adopted is just asking questions, and so
That's a great strategy.
Because it's like what happens in my brain a lot of times. It's like I get like a scaffolding. So like I'm at point A, then like why am I at point A? Where should I actually be? Where actually am I? And then I start building like the scaffolding, like what would be to this point, or what would be like there's like where I am, and then I try to like build up the logic as to this is not making any sense. But
no, I'm lost.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely get it. See, that's how it's done.
But this is part of the issue just with communicating ideas in general. And sometimes we have a familiarity with the idea in our head, but actually expressing that idea is really tough. And that's not really connected to Jamais Vu, but kind of is in a way.
I think it is. And I think it kind of connects to the whole concept, like that. I know every time we have so many freaking episodes out there. We've been doing this, 3.5 years, 2.5 years? I don't know. It's a long time. And at this point, every time we talk about something, it feels like Jamais Vu. Because I'm like, I know we've talked about something similar to this before, but this is also a new topic. So like, we're always tying it back to things. I think it's the natural inclination to tie things back to things that you are familiar with to make that association. So in a way, everything is Jamais Vu because it's how does it connect to things I already know?
Yeah.
Just like everything's a sandwich. Everything's a Jamais Vu sandwich.
Yeah, things feel from, sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you want to get in on the sandwich,
buy some bread. I think you're trying to plug our social media, but we already did that probably in the last episode.
I was just trying to get a reaction out of you. I'm sorry.
Well, it works.
But if you want to listen to other podcasts, we have a podcast network. It's called Podcast NH. Podcast NH has some of the best podcasts you would ever get in New Hampshire. Also, there's other podcast networks we have in our network now as well.
Absolutely. And if you want to find out if your state has a network yet, go to podcastusa.org and go to the Find My State section. You'll see which ones are currently up and running and which ones still need somebody to take hold and make it happen. We're looking for you. Even if you don't want to be in charge of it, just knowing you have interest, I can reach out and I can find people who want to be in charge of your network. And let me tell you, being a part of a network is huge for growth, both of the content of the show itself and in your listenership. Highly suggested. podcastusa.org.
And until next time, guys, you definitely have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. I hope this feels familiar, but not too familiar, because then if it feels familiar, but you know it's just unfamiliar, it's Jamais Vu. This is what the episode's about.
Oh, that reminds me of the opening song from The Long Winters, for My Brother and Me. The lyrics go, "It's familiar, but not too familiar, but not too not familiar."
What?
It's a new day.
We need to talk.
Hi, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Courtney.
And we'd like to introduce you to Damn You Diary,
a podcast that chronicles our epic attempts to squash bad karma
and tell you stories of our seemingly mundane lives.
You can find us at podcastnh.com
or on our website at damnyoudiary.com.
Cheers!
And here's a song that I brought up during the episode. It's by Meader. It's called Take a Bow off Jamais Vu.
For equestrians a misery, the quest began in mystery. By questioning the ministry, the quenching of the thirsty trees begins with restless nurseries. Merciless is merchantry, uncertainty is seemingly feeding the freedom that they seek. Bursting at the seams, the seeds they seep into the scenery. Speaking so uneasily, whilst feasting, wilting wildebeest. What will they see? Their wills deplete. Still their silver tongues be seething secrets out of jealousy. Melt with me, selfishly full meld to be a memory. We're meant to be mentally unmitigated motivation, making mountains sink beneath. Simply breathe, centuries untold unfold as sailors sing from wretched deeps through clenched teeth. Aggressive preach, while those who lose the most get told to roll on over back to sleep. Keep the peace, reaper sweetest tragedy. Sneaking silence into minds alive with tantalizing dreams. Seize the day and free the beat. When praying, try to keep receipts. Never lay where others eat. Let the music wash you clean. Let workers win and sinners weep. Synergy is paramount to why the meek are giving ground. Scream aloud, feed the crowded masses with your sickest sounds. Never lose the mood that muses will allow. Write it down or check the crown till you found yourself, and then remember how you came about. Save your doubt for when your voice picks choices others face and think it out. When it's time for stepping down, turn around to see the life you led, and if you'd like to take a bow.